Hey, what's up? Today we got another Honda. It was actually dropped off yesterday. It was supposed to come a little earlier in the day. I was going to try and get it all set up on the dyno, so that this morning it'd come in and be ready, as I had a bunch of stuff to take care of. So getting ready to set it up on the dyno now, but let's look at it. This thing's got different turbo manifold than what you normally see, so I always like to see stuff that's a little bit different. So, not sure who makes the manifold, but it's pretty cool. I like seeing stuff that's different. This thing has so many air fresheners in it. The whole shop smells like new car smell now. I can't get used to it. It's kind of weird. I got a couple small things to take care of first. I think there's some vacuum lines that aren't hooked up. The fuel rail is missing spacers. I don't want the car to catch on fire, so I'm going to fix that. These, you can try and put the OBD2 sensors on the charge pipe. They always leak like crazy, so I'm going to weld that shut. Looks like the TPS sensor needs to be adjusted, and hopefully with all that we can get started. So let me go ahead and take care of some of this stuff now. So trying to make sense of the vacuum line routing. It looks like we have the compressor cover going around all the way to the blow-off valve. So that's going to need to go to a vacuum source off the intake. And then it looks like some of these hoses are teed multiple times, which they don't need to be. So let's sort this out. Alright, I got the vacuum line deal sorted out. TPS is adjusted. Fuel rail is nice and tight now. Let's take this apart. So anybody watching that looking to do their own turbo kit install, don't use the OBD2 style air temp sensors unless you're doing them before the turbo. But it's on the wrong side of the engine bay, so generally you're not going to do that. The best thing to do is just run an OBD1 style and try and mount it on the intake manifold. You probably can't see it there, but we're going to weld that shut. Looks like we got one side of the pipe bead rolled, and then the other one isn't, so that's kind of interesting. Maybe I'll bead roll that real quick too. My bead roller is, well, started off life as a giant piece of shit, but is also on its last leg. Will probably be the next thing that I upgrade around here. Alright, that'll do the trick. Now let's weld. So a lot of people on this channel are here and watching because they're looking to buy a dyno. So just make sure when you buy a dyno, you also buy a welder because it comes in handy all the time. We're just going to fill this in. Usually I'd probably cut out a piece to fill it in or just replace this piece altogether, but customer just kind of wants to get through this without having to spend a fortune on it, so We'll weld it up. It'll work just fine. Alright, go ahead and cool this off and try and blend it in a little bit. I'm not going to polish it, I'll let him do that, but once you clean it up a little bit, you'll be able to tell it's welded. Throw this charge pipe back on. He said he was buying a map sensor, but then he brought one, and it sounds like the car might not have ran with it, so I don't know what's going on there. So next we'll investigate that and try and set up a base map for these injectors. And we need to extend the OBD2 air temp wiring and then run it to the OBD1 temp sensor on the back of the manifold. So let's do that now. Back in there, just tighten the clamps up. This coolant hood scares me a little bit. It's kinked and there's a ton of pressure on it. Hopefully that doesn't become an issue. And then looking at that, I noticed we're missing the exhaust manifold stud on the end and it's leaking a little bit. So hopefully that doesn't screw us here in a little bit. I'm going to wire up this sensor real quick and then I think it'll be about time to try and start it. So for the two air temp sensor wires, for this application we're just going to do good old-fashioned solder and heat shrink, which it's sort of funny, like 90% of the automotive world would think that's great and amazing, and then you get the 10% of guys that are like, you don't use a crimp connector, the whole world's going to explode. And we have some fancy crimpers, some fancy connectors and things that we use. If this is a map sensor for a pro mod, might do it a little differently, but given this is air temp sensor for this, this will hold up just fine. I feel perfectly confident saying that these two solder connections are going to outlast a lot of other components on the car, so it should work just fine. And if you are wiring an air temp sensor, the two wires, the polarity does not matter. So what that means is you can hook them up either way. This sensor is just a resistor, so you can't wire it backwards. And then the same thing goes for the boost solenoids. They're just two wires, but you can hook them up either way and they'll work just fine. So I've gotten those phone calls many a times over the years asking which way they go. Now we just gotta hope that the sensor itself is good. It was already in there, so we'll go ahead and assume that it is. So out of habit, I always download the file from the ECU, just in case, but this file is totally corrupt, so we're going to start from scratch, which we're going to do anyways. And since the 4-bar map sensor is questionable, we're going to just try and start it for the first time with the stock sensor, make sure everything works, and then hook up the 4-bar. Alright, set up for 1000cc injectors. Gotta calibrate the throttle position sensor. Bump the idle up a hair just so it'll start. Stock map sensor for now. Let's see if it'll start. Pretty rich. Alright, so far so good. Alright, got it all set up on the dyno. Usually I start off with all the part throttle and low load stuff. My gut just tells me to start doing the full throttle stuff first on this one and come back to the low load stuff if everything goes smooth. So we're going to start there and see. Not real sure what wastegate springs are in it. I was told like there's a combination of springs and it should only equal 5 pounds, and or 7 or 9 or 12. So I didn't get a quite solid answer there. So hopefully it's something reasonable. Let's see what we got. Leaking some coolant. So I just made a quick little run to 7,000 RPM or so. Forgot to record it, but just sort of make sure everything was alright. But this is crazy. I mean, I don't know, two whatever. Not worried about that. But before like VTEC and stuff comes on, it makes 130 horsepower. So it is like literally like just like a light switch. Yeah, so off boost this thing isn't doing a whole lot. So I'll investigate a little bit, see if can figure out why that one's so different. But looks like it's at least in the ballpark enough to start trying to make some runs and do some tuning. So here we go. I'm gonna need to keep an eye on the downpipe clamp. It's gonna sound super scary if that pops off in the middle of a run. Doesn't sound like it's leaking so far, but keep an eye on it. Rev that one out a little bit further. So far so good. It's making about 6 psi. I'm gonna try and see if I can get some mid-range to come back in. VTEC's pretty high. That's probably gonna make a huge difference. Kind of forgot this car's got CTR cams in it. Not Pro ones like nearly all the others, so I probably had the VTEC engagement point too high. We'll start there, play with some timing, and then turn the boost controller on and see what that'll do. Considering what it's making at 6 pounds, it should have no problem making some pretty decent power. And it's running nice and clean, which is by far the most important part. This one's just kind of like a fine line because it's his only car, so we don't have the option of anything breaking, so we'll try and keep it nice and conservative, even though I hate using that terminology in the tuning world, since it's what everyone says about everything regardless of anything. Alright, you can see bringing VTEC in brought it up some up in here, but there's still not a whole lot going on down here. Not much I can do about that though. And a little bit of timing, picked up a little bit of power up here, but not really enough of a much, considering it didn't do a whole lot here in the mid-range. I'm just going to pull that back out. We'll turn the boost up a little bit. A little less RPM. Got a little water leaking back here as well. Just have to keep an eye on it. You can see it's about 8 psi, hits about 9, a little earlier on in the run, tapers off. If you look at the green line here, you can see the TPS sensor's in the process of taking a shit. So hopefully we can make it through the day and he'll have to swap that out later. Gonna keep on trucking along. So this is pretty crazy. That's third gear. Fourth gear. So it's not that uncommon to see a slappy shifter, but the trans feels good. Like, you would feel this and you would think there's no way you could like drive it without putting it in the wrong gear, but it just sort of works. I don't know, see new stuff every day. It's always pretty cool to see it when each run goes up like that. Air fuel is right on the money, in the upper 11s. Could lean it out a little bit more, but again, it's his only car, and there's no reason to kill it. This is 10 psi, and somewhere right in this region, we're getting a little bit of a lean spot, but it's right where the TPS is cutting out. So I don't have a whole lot of control over that. I'm just going to keep an eye on it. It's so short and it's not very lean. It's 12.1, 12.2. Just something to keep an eye on. Let's pull the spark plug and see what we're looking like. Looks good to me. Perfectly okay with that. That one was a little too lean, had to get out of it early, but made the magic number. It's laying over pretty hard up top. Sounds like it's got a little bit of a mist to it. I'm going to go ahead and put some plugs in it, maybe gap them down, try one more. Boost is right at about 15 pounds, which is kind of where I want to call it quits. And with such a small wastegate spring, we're almost out of boost controller duty cycle anyways, so it's kind of a good stopping point. So let's slap some new plugs in it and see if we can get a clean run out of it, and call it a day, other than obviously going back and touching up some of the part throttle stuff. I've been messing with that here and there each run, so it's going to be pretty close. So this thing definitely wants to keep revving. It's stock sleeves and all that good stuff, so I'm only taking it to about 8,500 or so. It'd be kind of a really stupid way to kill it, trying to rev it to the moon, but yeah, for whatever reason the combination doesn't want to do anything down low, but then up top it's pretty happy, well, with the exception of that last run. But I think that was more of a misfire deal than totally laying over. These plugs are pretty big, they're 30 thousandths or so. It's really hot. These are the spark plugs that we use at these power levels. These are about 28 thousandths, so I'm gonna gap these down. Probably try like 20 thousandths and see where we're at. Alright, hopefully this will do the trick, and should just be able to make one more run. Should be good. I don't like what the TPS sensor is doing, especially as the air fuel is following what the TPS is doing. So I'm going to give him a bit of a disclaimer that he needs to change the TPS sensor before really beating on it. The difference on the dyno is you're not trying to watch other cars and watch the road and watch everything else, so you can keep an eye on the gauge. And looking at the one run where the air fuel was lean longer than I wanted it to be and I had to get out of it, it was 100% the TPS sensor. So out on the road you can't keep an eye on things like that. So hopefully he will listen and get a new sensor. And then obviously once a new sensor is installed, it will need to be calibrated. But it's super simple to do, and can walk him through it pretty easy. All right, let's try it again. Alright, you see we got 14 pounds. TPS was somewhat stable on that one, a whole lot better than a lot of the others. And let's see what we got for power. And I think we're going to call it good there. So here's on the gate in yellow versus red, which is at 14 pounds. You can see it's just, I mean, this thing's not making full boost till 7,000 RPM, something crazy. And it actually seems to be getting worse as you turn the boost up, which is, if anything, it's usually the other way around. So I don't know if we're dealing with some exhaust leaks or what the deal is with that. Nothing looks out of the ordinary, but maybe some leaks of some sort going on. So there might be some extra power on the table if you can get that sorted out. But all in all, it did what we needed it to do, so we're going to call it good here.